Last year, we were one of the first automotive YouTube channels to feature the Mazda 6 Signature, and at the time, I wanted to spend a little more time with it than we had. Our snapshot is on this 2019 Mazda 6 Signature. There's a few changes for 2019. Mazda's added their G-Vectoring Control Plus system to this vehicle. They've also moved the auto-dimming interior mirror down from the GT trim to the GSL, so it's a little plus for people who are looking at essentially the mid-trim. There's also automatic power folding mirrors, great thing to have here in Canada. It was something that you could get in Europe. And they've also put the 7-inch driver information screen that we've seen on other 2019 models from Mazda. With all this, the MSRP for all the models sold here in Canada have only gone up by $100. So last year was $39,050. This year it's $39,150. So we're going to be going over what's different about this car, taking on a drive, and going over what you need to know if you're in the market for a sub $40,000 mid-size sedan. So I'm mixing things up a little bit here on our test drive snapshot episode. Normally I'd stand in front of the car, even though there's not a whole lot to talk about, and go over some of the changes and features. But since we really did do that in depth last year, I don't want to waste your time. If you want to know absolutely everything about the features and the design and all that for the Mazda 6 Signature, watch our video. You can click a link in the bottom of the video or at the end of the video. Today I just want to talk about my experience with the car for more than a few hours. Some of the small changes, like I said, we have gone over some of the teeny tiny things that are different for 2019. They're not going to make or break it for most people. Power folding mirrors, that's a nice plus though. But I just want to talk a little bit about how this car has been for me. Now last year we featured quite a number of mid-sized consumer sedans, so we were able to kind of rank them. The Kia Optima came in first place. This was a close second, and it's just because the Kia did everything well. Everything across the board was a solid hit for us. Whereas the Mazda, just a few teeny tiny things didn't quite hit the mark for us. The infotainment's one of them. We've had quite a bit of control issues with it. Starting it up, there's a serious amount of lag. I'm talking worse than Volvo, if you can believe it. But we know that Mazda has a better system. I wasn't expecting it for 2019, since they only debuted it on the Mazda 3. So probably by next year we might see it if they do a facelift for sure. But it might be 1 or 2 years before we see that system implemented across the rest of their fleet. So it's not the greatest right now, but because we know there's something so good out there from Mazda, it's hard to get too upset about it. It does work. It's just really slow on startup. The rest of the car, though, I absolutely love driving it. Seating space here is good. I'm very comfortable. Visibility is excellent as well. I do feel I sit a little bit higher up. I don't have tons of headroom. With other cars, I find there's just a little bit more headroom. With this one, I'm pretty much at the roof here. So something to note, if you're taller, I'm 6 foot tall, but add on about another inch or so for weight. So a little bit tighter for my headroom, but aside from that, the car is really good. Now I'm going to leave all the fuel economy stuff until the absolute end. We always like to wait until I finalized all of those numbers before we talk about it. The driving segment on our test loop has been done, so I do have that number, but we'll wait until the end because that is something important to note. With the 2.5 liter turbocharged engine, you are going to be using a little bit more fuel, but still pretty much in line with other vehicles in this segment. So we'll wrap that up. I tell people all the time, when I compare a car to a crossover, there's pretty much no crossovers out there that take the cake. And just like with that, this is the same. I would absolutely prefer to drive the Mazda 6 over something like the CX-5. The CX-9 is a slightly different vehicle just because it's so much bigger, but again, if I didn't need that third row, I'd easily take this over the bigger CX-9. I just like having it. Sure, you lose out on all-wheel drive. You don't always need it. If you get a good set of winter tires during the winter, you will be okay. So winter driving might be a little different. We did have the Mazda 6 last year. We did feature it with the manual transmission. Again, aside from the interior and exterior changes, more or less the vehicle is about the same from that. And we had no problems. We had bad snowstorms last year when we had the Mazda 6. So here's like a little off the line. I'm not going to do too much of a rip. But, it picks up pretty quick for a front-wheel drive car with a 6-speed transmission. Again, Mazda hasn't moved up to anything else other than their 6-speed, but it works pretty well. And I gotta say that the power's there. You can use the flappy paddles, and you can shift it. I won't let you shift down if you're not allowed to. But you can use the paddle shifters. You can use the stick here in the center to be able to shift it up. Correct shift pattern. You pull towards you to shift up, which is the way you should be doing it, and then you shift away from you to shift down. I like it that way. Most people will probably agree that that's the right way to do it. But the point is, this car is very good. Most people aren't going to have it in sport mode, so we'll put it back into normal mode. A lot of people are probably buying this because they want something bigger than your traditional compact car. They want a little bit more space, a little bit more features, and it's kind of a problem with featuring the 2019 Mazda 3 before this. There's some great tech aside from the infotainment, but there's some other features on that car that just were so good that they haven't trickled down to this yet, even though it technically is trickling up. So we're expecting again to see an update within the next year or two. That'll be even better. But even without those features, even without having the integrated wiper blades with the nozzles to make things just a little safer on the road, despite any of that, I just love driving this car. I think it looks really handsome, maybe a little conservative. It's not necessarily the most flashiest vehicle out there, but I really do like it. And I notice other Mazda 6s on the road because it does have a bigger presence than even the new Mazda 3, even though it is very easy to spot those as well. I just find that finding these on the road is always a treat for me. I like having more space. No all-wheel drive is not the end of the world, especially on a relatively nice spring day like this. You don't really want to have it anyway. But overall, very solid car. And that's what I love about featuring Mazda's products so far. 15, 20 years ago, you bought a Mazda because you couldn't afford the Honda. But today, you buy a Mazda because you really do want something that is different from the rest. You want something that's a little sophisticated, a little premium oriented, not your run-of-the-mill boring sedan. That's what I just love about featuring these cars, because Mazda has gone through such a transformation over the last 20 years, and even within the last 10 years, it is a noticeable transition from being just a car brand to being one of the premier car brands in the consumer segment. They have done so much to improve the brand image, improve the vehicles, the design, the technology, the features, everything. And I always say that in the comments when people come and they say, I bought a Mazda, I absolutely love it. I was on the fence before. That's the only thing holding them back, is people who still have a stigma towards the brand. They haven't experienced something new from them. And if you don't consider this car, if you really are in the market for a mid-size sedan, and you do not consider the Mazda 6 as one of the vehicles you absolutely have to go test drive, you're doing yourself a disservice. I always say it because it's so true. This does do everything so well, except for this. Just don't worry about the infotainment. Plug in your phone, use Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. It'll be a little bit better experience. But everything about the Mazda 6 is so good now. If we compared it back to a 2006 Mazda 6, you'd be like, whoa, is that the same car? Because it is so radically different compared to what it was before. And that's why I wanted to book this car. That's why I wanted to do this car. That's why we're featuring this car alongside a Volvo in our upcoming episode of Test Drive Showdown, because this is so good now that you really can compare it to things outside of the consumer segment and realize why it can compete there. And that's why I like driving it. But that's it for our driving segment. I want to now take it back to the studio, more or less, and go over the fuel economy numbers for this vehicle, and then we'll wrap up our episode of Test Drive Snapshot on the 2019 Mazda 6 Signature. During our 100-kilometer test loop, the 2019 Mazda 6 Signature did 7.4 liters per 100 kilometers, or 32 US miles per gallon, and rounded off at 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers, or 26 miles per gallon during our full week. It's not bad based on our testing. However, we haven't had enough mid-size sedans through our new testing system to compare with. Although this is just a snapshot, I think it's important for us to go over what we liked and disliked about the 2019 Mazda 6 Signature. As mentioned, there are a few new for 2019 features carried over from vehicles like the CX-9 that we've seen on other vehicles from the Japanese manufacturer. Mazda continues to add their rear seatbelt reminder system, which is found on this car, though it is located a little too high in the headliner for me to be able to see when I'm seated comfortably. The exterior design of the Mazda 6 is a hit for us. It's conservative but elegant and sophisticated at the same time. It's not meant to stand out, but to stand above the rest, and it excels at that. The interior design and amenities is also a win in our books, with the ultra suede elements and leather dash, on top of features like the ventilated front seats and color head-up display. Overall ride and comfort of this car will help to set it apart from the competition, with systems like G Vectoring Control Plus and a suspension geared more towards comfort than sportiness. And finally, engine performance with the 2.5-liter turbocharged inline-4 is great. While it might not be the most impressive number at 227 horsepower with regular fuel and 250 with premium, the Mazda 6 is far to feel like a slouch when getting up to highway speeds or passing slower traffic. But there are a few misses that we need to talk about. We've driven all of Mazda's North American vehicles at this time, and the infotainment system on the Mazda 6 is one of the slowest to start up, even worse than Volvo's Sensus. We've had considerable problems with the latency on startup when attempting to back out of a parking spot, where the camera controls will freeze up and delay for up to 30 seconds before running through each command at lightning speed. The same has been true for audio, where the system needs nearly a minute to load up before anything useful can be inputted. Now, we have tested Mazda's next generation infotainment in the 2019 Mazda 3 GT, and it's a light year ahead in terms of design, speed, and overall functionality, so we're hoping to see it make its way to other Mazda vehicles sooner rather than later. The 360-degree camera system is still laughably bad, something we again mentioned with the 2019 Mazda 3, where improvements were made while also causing new problems. The cameras do work to see where the parking spot lines are, but using the rear camera for cross-traffic visibility is pretty much impossible, as the detail and definition of the camera is so low that you'll never tell if a car is coming or not. But those are our only complaints. With small features to make its way from the Mazda 3, there's a lot to look forward to in the near future, but that doesn't mean buyers should hold off. The dislikes about the Mazda 6 Signature are blips compared to what's great about it. It really is the best sedan no one's buying.